Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Duke. I'm a partner at the Miller Thomson offices here in Edmonton. And I'm very pleased that you can join us here for this next session. Our topic here in this group is going to be unionization in the post-COVID era, the evolving landscape, and some best practices. And so we've only got about 40 minutes and we've got a lot of material to cover here. So we're going to try and move through it as quickly as possible. I'm very happy to be joined by a couple of my longtime partners here. First of all, I'm going to introduce Gary Rosen. Gary is a partner in our Montreal office. He's been practicing for probably over 35 years now. And Gary's actually been in bargaining this week, but he's just sort of taken a brief break. I'm not sure if the union was real happy with you stepping out of your bargaining session to come and do this seminar, Gary, but thanks for joining us. Gary?
Thanks. Hi,
Excellent.
everyone. Thanks for being here.
We're also joined by one of my other longtime partners, Jeff Grube. Jeff is in the Regina office of Miller Thompson's, and Jeff's also been practicing since the late 80s and has tons of experience in terms of all kinds of different labor matters, all the way from bargaining, conducting arbitrations, pretty much everything you could imagine. And Jeff joins us from sunny Regina today. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, I think you're muted still. Sorry.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the introduction and very happy and pleased to be here today. As Tom has mentioned, I practice in the Regina office of Miller Thomson and have been doing so for many, many years, more years than I care to count. But the primary focus of my practice is in the labor and employment law area and associated administrative law area. And in addition to practicing in Saskatchewan, I also do some practicing in Manitoba. So happy to be here and hope you find our presentation today helpful and informative. Tom?
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. So we'll just go on to our next slide here, and I'm going to try and sort of set the stage for us a little bit. We can even go on to the next one from here. And I wanted to sort of give you a brief overview of we're going to try and cover three topics today here, really. So if we go on to the next slide here, we'll show you what those three topics are. The first one, and I said we're going to try and cover all of this in about the next half an hour and leave a little bit of time for questions. But we're going to talk about the trend in terms of increased unionization over the last 5 or so years. And we'll talk briefly about what are some of the reasons for that. There's a variety of reasons that I think that have driven this sort of trend that we've seen. Not all of them are in the control of you as employers, but I think some of them you could have some influence on. The second topic that we're going to talk about is, where are we seeing this happen? There are some industries that have not traditionally been organized in terms of labor. But in the last few years, we have seen increased union activity. So we're going to talk about that trend and sort of really why that's happening. The third one, and I think probably most importantly for all of you, we're going to talk about what you as employers can do to try and deal with this issue. Really, it's the ounce of prevention is better than the pound of cure, but getting into those details of what you as employers can do. So with that, I think we're going to just try and launch into this. And our first topic as we go on to the next slide is talking about what is the impact of COVID-19, been on the workplace in terms of this increased trend of unionization. And Jeff, why don't you sort of start us off here?
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. Well, it's probably a bit of an understatement to say that, COVID-19 has turned the world upside down in many respects. And while it seems, a distant and unfavorable memory, it still does have its lingering impacts, including in the labor and employment area. And it's interesting to see sort of what has happened in terms of unionization and union activity within the workplace since COVID-19 and why that has happened. And so firstly, what we have observed and are seeing is that there's been an uptick in union activity since COVID-19. There's more certification applications. There's more activity in terms of workplaces where unions do exist. And we've noticed that since COVID. And so the question that I've been asked to address is, well, why do you think that's happened? There are a number of reasons, and obviously there'll be different reasons for every workplace. But some of the overriding reasons that we're seeing is COVID impacted most people around the globe, but it impacted employees probably significantly more than most. There were job layoffs, losses, and that's one of the things that caused many employees to sort of wonder, is there a better way to protect their position? And they realized how vulnerable, many of them realized how vulnerable they were. And at the same time, we also noted that some employers, companies, large companies in particular, had record profits during COVID because of the nature of their platforms and so forth. So that gap kind of fueled the interest in organizing for some employees. The other issue was, COVID really highlighted, health and safety in the workplace. That's what COVID was all about, was this horrible risk that was presenting and running rampant across the world, including in workplaces. And it highlighted in many workplaces some of the deficiencies that they encountered. And in addition, it presented risk to a number of employees, particularly employees involved in health sectors or frontline workers that didn't get sent home during COVID, and the risk that they were exposed to. Those kinds of things were the impetus for greater unionization, union activity. We also noticed, with sort of the ever invasive social media presence that we have, that during COVID, obviously lots of people kept connected through social media, and that tended to amplify stories of unsafe workplaces or poor treatment. In addition, was created a very unique environment for unions to organize. It was another way for unions to reach out to employees. So that was a factor in causing increased workplace unionization, union activity. In addition, there were the work from home, and then the return to the office, and that created some tensions between employees and employers in some cases. Some employees wanted to work remotely, some then didn't want to return to the office. All of these tensions caused and were ripe for unions to intervene and try to enhance their role or their activity. There were government stimuluses and policies. So one example was CERB, where the government paid employees to stay home. And that caused many employees to think, well, that's not a bad gig, and maybe we want that on a more permanent basis in our workplaces. So again, that was another factor that caused an increase in union activity. So overall, there was a variety of factors that caused that, but and it was specific to some locations. So I don't know, Gary, if you can help us in terms of what happened in Quebec.
I mean, I think post-COVID, or the impact of COVID, is in Quebec is everything that you listed, or everything that Jeff just listed. It's no different in terms of the province of Quebec, particularly, and I don't think it's any different in any other province. Each of us have clients that have pan-Canadian operations or operations in every different province. It's been leveraged essentially. I think essentially the pandemic has been very intelligently leveraged by the union movement. Okay. And all of these things, which were always leveraged ever since I began practicing, but except for RTO and other things, but layoffs, burnout, health and safety, it's never about money in my experience, a union organizing campaign. It's always about, non-money issues and unfavorable treatment. And I think COVID just highlighted for many employees in Quebec and elsewhere, uh, and gave a union the calling card they need.
Maybe go on to the next slide here. I know that we had talked about there were some other items. Gary, you and I had sort of spoken about this causes of increased union activity.
Sure.
Some of it is that sort of perceived vulnerability that I think that the unions seized on with all of their members.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we have two slides on this that I'll run through and then give you some sort of highlights, some additional thoughts, and I'll let Tom and Jeff weigh in. But from a COVID perspective, obviously, I just mentioned, in as well as another employee, and why is that? And therefore, let's reach out to the union or a union organizer. Vaccination became an issue. That's a health and safety issue. RTO, return to the office, has become a huge issue. Everyone, I'm sure, attending this conference knows that the public sector unions across Canada, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, are challenging the return to the office, in invoking rights or claims under collective agreements that arguably they don't have, but they don't really care. And so if you're a non-unionized worker or employee and you don't want to go back to the office, well, maybe the union's the answer. If you go to the next slide, inflation obviously been a big issue in the union movement. And then, unionization with wage gains, labor market shortages. Um, I think that, over and above the two slides we had prepared on causes of increased union activity, the other thing that I would highlight for all of you, that again, anyone on this on in this meeting will know about, but I'm just reminding you of, is we're in an unprecedented time of ease of access to information. And so there's unions are smartly publicizing what they say are gains or success with unionized employers, in terms of getting significant wage increases for the cost of inflation during the post-COVID era. Um, Millennials, the new generation, my kids are increasingly being exposed to unionization and the advantages of union on platforms like TikTok. If you Google TikTok, you'll be amazed at what you're going to see out there that's pro-union and extolling the advantages of joining a union. And that's how the next generation of workers learns, for all intents and purposes, and unions are already there as opposed to employers. Um, the last thing is, and again, this is unprecedented, at least in my lifetime, is that there's a uniform, it appears to be a uniform view across all political parties that unions are good. It used to be that you would never, at least in my youth, see a federal conservative leader aligning themselves with the union movement. Polyev clearly has. He did in the last campaign. He recently did during the flight attendant strike, as has Doug Ford in Ontario. The only holdout right now from any, quotation mark conservative politician in Canada is here in Quebec with Legault. We'll see how long we'll have an election here next year. We'll see how long that lasts and whether or not he takes the same move. So, over and above all these causes that we've run through, you have these three, these unique features of what's going on right now. Unions are now good things, and there's no one talking about any of the negatives surrounding unions these days.
I mean, one of the
I don't
things
know.
too, I think that we've seen there's been some changes over the years. I can speak to it here in Alberta, but I know it's happened in a bunch of other provinces too, in terms of the legislative framework has also changed a bit in terms of, automatic certification, and how
Right.
these votes can happen. And that changes in some jurisdictions, particularly where there's NDP governments. that has made things easier for the unions to organize. Jeff,
Yeah,
do you
there's no,
want to?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add, Tom, on that point. There is no, it's not a coincidence that BC going back to card check in 2023
Yeah.
has led to significant successes against two large employers who heretofore have successfully resisted unionization, such as Amazon and Starbucks, right? So, that's certainly a factor since in the last few years. Sorry, Jeff.
I also note that Manitoba as well has gone back to a card filing system for certification as well, and that obviously makes it easier for unions to certify. One point that I think merits a little bit more discussion are sort of the technological changes that have occurred since COVID. Obviously pre-COVID, there was social media and interaction on the internet and so forth, but COVID really highlighted that and brought it into the mainstay. Virtual meetings are now routine, whereas they weren't pre-COVID. So COVID has done many things in that respect that has allowed unions to reach out to prospective members much easier than was the case previously. It's no longer necessary for union leadership to go to the plant floor and hustle about and meet people and so forth. They can do so online, and that has driven, from what I've observed, significant union activity. Tom?
Yeah, I'll jump in just on that, Tom.
Sure.
What COVID did was require all employers to train all employees, no matter the generation, on how to interact, communicate, sign, execute things online. Unions have been doing online organizing before COVID, but what employers did during COVID is train our employees on how, all of your employees, on how to easily communicate and sign a union card online, a skill set they might not have had pre-COVID.
Yeah, no, it was really, really striking, I think. And I think one of the things that we saw was it really impacted a lot of industries, which, until a few years ago had never been organized. Jeff, do you want to sort of walk us through some of the industries that we're sort of talking about in that sense? Ones that, didn't have a big union presence, but we certainly see it increasing. If we go on to the next slide here.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, there are some new non-traditional industries that have been impacted, but also the traditional industries have seen an uptick in union activity as well. Interestingly enough, or maybe not interestingly enough, retail, restaurant, hospitality, which are often sort of lower paid employees, we've seen a real uptick in union activity there. And, I attribute that to the fact that most of those folks during COVID, those employees, were required to stay at work. They were the frontline people. They were exposed to the risk firsthand in terms of COVID. And that prompted a number of them to say, well, we need more protection than we're currently getting. And they thought unionization might assist in that respect. Obviously, the healthcare sector, the education sector, same concept in the sense that they were the frontline employees that didn't get to work from home, and so safety was front and center for them. Other industries, the warehousing industry and the transportation industry, everybody that was staying at home were doing their shopping from home as well. But the warehouses that were distributing those products and the transportation workers who were delivering them, they had to continue to do their work and continue to show up and couldn't work remotely. So again, they were impacted and I think then tended more towards the union as being hopefully a safeguard for them. So those are some of the more traditional sectors that saw an uptick. Gary, I think you've experienced or saw some activity in the non-traditional sectors.
Yeah, I mean, so as many of you may know, but Montreal is a hub for video game development. So video games, we have, since the Quebec government enacted uh, many years ago legislation to, sort of subsidize the industry, Ubisoft, Electronic Arts entered the market, and then a bunch of local companies, universities produced the talent that would help develop the games. And so it exploded as an industry. There's an entire section of the downtown core where there's, video game development company or related companies in the industry. FX is special effects. Montreal has long been a center for, movie productions, but FX and special effects boomed here as well. And so what we've been seeing, at least in Quebec, and I know it's the same thing in BC, uh, is a uptick, particularly since the conflict in the United States in the movie industry. When AI became the huge issue, got, incredible publicity. You couldn't turn on a television, open up your computer without flashing a story focused on AI and how AI was going to take away jobs. And so essentially what happened in the video gaming industry is that sort of bled into the video game industry. And so there's been a ton of organizing and a couple of successful campaigns here in Montreal, as well as in the United States. And so that's, and again, that's an industry that's not a traditional union shop. It's not a hourly paid worker. You're talking about creative workers, don't work normal hours. Some of them come in at noon, work till midnight. Others go from 9 to 6, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but the again, a certain generation um, ripe for the picking in terms of the fear of AI and what the impact of AI will have on their jobs. And so all of a sudden, and of course, traditional unions need new members in the United States and in Canada. We've seen the Communication Workers of America and Canada focus on the video game industry because all the workers that used to produce print media, are out of a job. And so the unions need members, and they've focused on the video. These particular unions have focused on the video game industry as well as the special effects industry.
Yeah, it is quite striking. We always sometimes forget on the management side that the unions are businesses too, and they're always looking to grow. And so, when they see those opportunities like a declining industry like newspapers, they are going to pivot quickly, and they're big, well organized, entities too. I think, one of the things that we should try and get to here before we run out of too much time, and because I think this is what is really important for the folks listening here is, what can the employers do? So if we go on to our next slide here, we're going to talk about a few items here. And what I'd like to do, Gary and Jeff, I'd like for everybody to sort of jump in here because both of you guys have been doing this for 35 plus years here. you know, what are really the most important things that an employer can do to be proactive and to get out in front of this? I think sometimes when you find out that the organizing drive is happening, it's too late. But so what are some of the real things that you can do even before you find out that there's an organizing drive about to happen or has even started? Gary, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off just by looking at the slide and telling you that there's a reason we put communication as key first. I'm sure you've heard this before, but I cannot, and none of us cannot emphasize enough how clear communication channels, clear communication, regular communication with your employees is at the heart of any successful business and avoiding a successful union organizing campaign. I encourage, and all of us encourage our clients to meet regularly with employees, hold town halls. Today, in today's day and age, with the technology you have, there's no reason you can't hold these regularly and open it up to questions, find out what the employees' concerns are, and of course, talk about successes. Don't be afraid to talk about, your successes as an employer. The second item is, obviously make sure you're on top of whether your total compensation is competitive. There's all kinds of resources today that didn't exist when I started practicing. In those days, you had to pick up the phone and ask your competitors. As today, there's a lot of resources out there that allow you to make sure you're competitive. Um, Again, the fourth bullet is another one that's extremely important. This is one of the major reasons I've seen successful campaigns or union organizing campaigns is, treat all your employees equally and make sure that your supervisors, the frontline people or frontline managers understand the importance of that. Uh, I would say at least half of the campaigns I've handled over during my career have been the result of a perception of an employee or the unfavorable or inequitable treatment of a single employee leading to a group of employees looking to organize. I'll let Jeff, continue. Tom, you can jump in, and then I have a few other thoughts maybe at the end after the two of you have spoken.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
thanks,
Jeff.
thanks, Gary. And just to sort of reinforce, because I think, as Gary said, communication is key, and we can't sort of overstate how important that is when dealing with a union drive. The other point that I would emphasize as well, and Tom, you'd mentioned this, that if you're hearing about a union drive and the union's already in the front door organizing, the horse has kind of left the barn at that stage, and there's very little you're going to be able to do at that stage. There are some things, but not very much. The heavy lifting has to occur before there's any sense that there's a union drive in place. And as Gary noted earlier on, in my experience, and I agree with Gary's comment, that unionization, that employees typically are not drawn to it because of wages or the perception that they have low wages. That can be a factor, but often that's not the driving force. Typically, the driving force is a sense that the employees, that there's some unfairness, that they're not being heard, that their complaints are not being dealt with, that the frontline managers are not treating them fairly or with respect. It's those kinds of issues that will drive employees towards unions quicker than anything else. So as an employer, you need to be mindful of what is the culture within your organization? What are the communication lines? What is being said? Are we treating our employees with respect? Are we dealing with complaints proactively and fairly and reasonably? All of those things are things that employers can do. Tom?
Yeah, no, thanks. And once we just go on to the next slide here, we've got a couple more of these points here that we want to sort of get through. But I think, one of the things that is really hard to sort of overemphasize is you also do want to have the plan in place and have all of your frontline supervisors, managers understand what they're to be looking for and that they understand, how we're going to try and deal with this. The plan that you would have in place if there is ever an organizing drive, I mean, the timelines under the legislation across the provinces is pretty short. You usually got about a week before the vote's going to happen if you are in one of those jurisdictions. And I'm lucky enough to be in Alberta where it's still typically going to be a vote. But you need to have that response largely planned before the organizing drive happens. Gary, I know you had a few more points that you've noticed over
Yeah,
the
yeah. I
last
mean,
week.
I'll go through a few more, and
Yeah.
we have lots of partners that have gone through a few things. So let me go through 4 points
Okay.
that I cannot emphasize enough, and don't think I'm trying to sell our services. I'm not, but clearly we have the ability to do this training for you. Number one, I cannot, and I'm always surprised by when a petition for certification lands on my clients' desks, how they know nothing or very little about how certification works. And so, number one, make sure that the HR person that works for you, the HR department, the HR leader, or whoever is responsible for human resources is up to date on the union certification process. Okay, how it unfolds, how it works, how quickly it goes. There's no reason that there shouldn't be somebody who stays up to date on that and is properly trained on that. And you don't need to spend a lot of time with whoever you deal with at Miller Thomson to get a lesson on that. We have that information for every province. And why do I say this? Because believe it or not, at least in Ontario and Quebec, unions can still file for certification by fax. Okay. And so I mean, in my experience, very few people look at faxes, check their faxes. And we've had a few situations in Ontario, and I've known of a few in Quebec, where the petition comes in by fax and nobody's seen it. And all of a sudden, and in one case in Quebec, a former colleague of mine, his client was unionized because they never saw the fax come in, and the delays expired. What have I been telling my clients is, listen, if you don't use faxes, there's no reason you don't disable your fax, and you make clear on your website there is no fax machine anymore. At least you avoid that issue, and then they have to serve you in the old traditional way. The other thing that I'll would say is, and it's in the plan response before the organizing drive happens, but we've done, and I've done, and I know Tom and Jeff have done, and we have these action plans, but there should be an action plan in place, and there should be some training on it, in my view, for what happens if you get the scent of a union organizing drive. As prepare and react. You got to be ready to react within hours. Okay. And so get that action plan in place. It's critical.
That's great. So I think if we go on to the next slide here, we've had a few questions come in already. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but there's a couple that I think we can try and get to. We've got just about 5 or so minutes here left. One of them was about steps that an employer could take, but we've already just touched on that really briefly here. The one here that I think is quite interesting, and we're going to try and look forward a bit here. The question was, it seems like there's been a lot of developments in the 5 years since the pandemic, but now looking forward, what do you see happening in the coming years? So I'll maybe just sort of start off here and be a little bit optimistic, but maybe now that inflation is sort of moderated a bit, maybe some of those pressures that sort of helped the union organize, and I think that a lot of folks may have been driven towards unions because they thought they could maybe get some wage gains to help them keep up with that big inflation we had throughout the last number of years. With that moderating now, maybe that'll be a bit of a break for the employers that they won't have quite that same pressure. That's maybe sort of the optimistic view. Jeff, I know we chatted about this briefly a couple of weeks ago, and you thought it may not be that much reason for optimism, though.
Yeah, well, I think that what drives unionization, from an overall global perspective, more than anything, is the economy, and how is the economy, how's unemployment going, those kinds of things. My sense is, if we start to have an economic downturn and unemployment starts to increase, I think that becomes more fruitful for unions. It causes, higher unemployment causes more fear amongst employees. More fear causes them to think, well, maybe a union can help me and assist me. So I think, and the projections are that the economy both in Canada and south of the border is due for a correction here. And if that happens, and if tariffs continue to take hold and drives production down, and we start to see more layoffs and terminations and those kinds of things, I think we continue to see an uptick in union activity.
Gary, I'll let you have a crack at this one too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say we chose this topic to include it in the webinar because I think there's a general consensus, at least within the firm and the labor and employment group within the firm, that this is going to be a very important issue for employers in Canada for the next 5 years. I think to add to Jeff's points, I would add 2 points or 3 points. Number one, I think the flight attendant strike is a harbinger of things to come. If some of you in this room remember the 70s, in the 70s, across Canada, whether it was Jean-Claude Perrault at Canada Post, Buzz Hargrove in the 70s and 80s, but unions were unafraid. They had strong leadership. They basically defied the government. They were successful, and that success bred success. And I think the flight attendant union, this recent success, both from a public relations perspective, but also their defiance of the tribunal orders, is going to create momentum across the movement. Another thing that I think is going to create momentum over the next 5 years, and it's based on my experience with the video gaming industry, is the impact of artificial intelligence or AI. This is going to be used increasingly by trade unions to organize workers over and above the impact on the economy, or if the economy turns south. The risk of AI, or the perceived risk of AI to job security, is already being used. It was used successfully and is being used successfully in video gaming, for example, but it will begin to be used successfully across the board. And there, I'm going to turn back and to end on my comment here about the importance of communication. If you as an employer, if any of you on this call, in this meeting are looking at AI, using AI, introducing AI, make sure you communicate clearly on how you're going to use it, you know, and whether there's going to be an impact on the workforce, because people go on TikTok. There's actually a TikTok on AI that I'm sure the union movement is behind, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So those are you know, there are two other reasons, I think. And then the third reason is just generically, and I touched on it earlier, but I mean, there is no major political party left, including Donald Trump in the United States, who is not pro-union. It's just what it is. It's just today's day and age. And so all of those things are going to contribute to, I think, increasing campaigns. And so that's why everyone needs to get ready and be prepared.
Yeah, I think having that preparation, we got another question come in about, what are the first steps that an employer should take when they find out about the organizing drive? I think that's the one where, you really have to have the plan ready before then. And we've touched on that a little bit. We've had a number of questions come in through here, and we're just going to run out of time here, everybody. We're not going to have a chance to get to all of them. I think what we are going to try and do is to respond to the folks who have sent us in some questions over the next couple of days. We'll try and send you an email to answer some of your questions. There's some terrific questions that have been coming in here. But we're sort of running a bit out of time here. So one of the things that I was asked to do was at the end of our presentation, and I'll just maybe just give one last word to Gary and Jeff before we sign off. But when we do, what we'd ask everyone to do is to return to the agenda, and then that'll get you into your next session here in this new in this new format that we're trying here. Jeff, do you want to have any last words here?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I guess my overall message would be that when the union comes knocking, it's not a time to panic. Obviously, it's a time to be concerned, but you need to reach out, get good help, assist. You are allowed to communicate with employees, contrary to some traditional thinking that you can't even talk to employees once the union's at the door. There are obviously some rules that you have to be mindful of, but proceed forward in a thoughtful, responsive way, get good help to deal with the situation. And even if you ultimately end up with a union, that doesn't mean your business is going to close or is going to be the end of your business. There are many businesses that are successful even with unions. So just stick to it, take heart, and you will get through the process. Gary?
Gary, we'll give the last word to you. You've got about 30 seconds here.
Yeah, I see that. I think I agree with Jeff, with everything Jeff said. Again, I'll just repeat, make sure that whoever is your HR leader is knowledgeable. You could limit, the training, the initial training and the action plan to a very close circle of senior leadership. And of course, understand that you're able to talk to your employees during an organizing campaign. and just you need some guidance from, you know, outside professionals. We're ready to help, but it's easily dealt with, and it's not the end of the company, that's for sure.
I think that we're at time, so we're gonna have to sign off. Enjoy the rest of the sessions today, everyone, and
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody.